Oklahoma State had a nice little tune-up scrimmage over the weekend. And while I'm not saying we're going to be as good as the 2011 offense or the 2017 offense, I am saying it's going to look pretty darn close.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for swinging on through to make this your first listen. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. The bee's knees for all of your betting needs is here to help you. Just head on over to FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's going to hit a bomb in Major League Baseball today. Meanwhile, we get to slide right into this somewhat scrimmage conversation. We're not going to go too deep into the weeds, but we are going to talk about some overarching themes over the weekend. And as you all know, sometimes it's better to piggyback off of somebody. So I'm going to bring another guest in today. Once again, Connor Knight from Night Vision Media. Brother, man, school has started. There's going to be some vibes around campus, but it's going to be our job to help get those vibes cranked up to another level. First of all, how are you feeling about school starting and campus becoming lively again?
Yeah, most definitely. You see everybody in class today. It's pretty busy. You got all these sororities, everybody rushing. So, it's vibes are pretty high. I think the only thing I see right now is I don't think people realize what this team can be capable of in 2026. So I feel like that's what excites me. I was telling you off the camera, I wish they played week 0 just to get the energy even higher, because I think this team can be really good in 2026.
I think it just goes to show again that there are a significant number of prognosticators out there that haven't really looked at any film other than maybe some Drew Mestemaker. And there's a common theme of they've just got a bunch of North Texas dudes. They're going to be the North Texas Cowboys, and nobody could expect them to be really heavily competitive in the Big 12 with a bunch of North Texas players. I do think that there is a common theme out there. So I understand you want to see a week 0 just so we could kind of shut some of that down. So let's go ahead and do our part now in shutting some of that down. Brother, man, I think it was a pretty fun scrimmage over the weekend. I think a lot of players got a lot of opportunities. It was a good time to just get eyes on to some degree on what this team could potentially look like. And again, while we're not going to tiptoe into the weeds on a bunch of individual stuff, what I am willing to say is this offense is probably going to be running track meets on people once again. And if you go back and look at 2011, 2017, there's a lot of commonality, I think. But 2011, that was, Brandon Weeden was famous for getting the ball out of his hand in under 3 seconds. And then they would kind of, slant 3 yard, 5 yard out, 5 yard dig, 10 yard out. They would do that to death. And then boom, all of a sudden there's Justin Blackman running down the field for an 82-yard touchdown. It kind of feels like this offense has those same capabilities, primarily because of the wide receiver position, which we're going to cover primarily in segment 3. But I'm just insanely excited to know that this team likely has the capability. The up-tempo stuff was something that was pretty normal for them to run at North Texas, and that is pretty normal for Oklahoma State to see. But I also think that there is a capability on this offense to slow things down at times and bleed the clock a little bit, which may be one of the few things we were not able to do as much in 2011. What are your thoughts on, because you and I were talking off air, that is around the time that you started getting very heavily into college football and you were watching some of the Oklahoma State stuff. So you got to see some of the Brandon Weeden, Justin Blackman, Joe Randall style of offenses. Whether you believe that this offense can produce that or not, what is that, gut reaction when you hear we could be an offense that looks like 2011, 2017 again?
Yeah, most definitely. Back then when you turned on the TV, I wasn't trying to go watch the Big 10 or the ACC. You always wanted to go watch some Big 12 high-scoring offenses, Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudloph, Patrick Mahomes, them high-scoring type games, them exciting games. I mean, back then there wasn't no defense being played, so it's a little more defense being played now. But you look at your offense. You have an elite running back. You have all these receivers. You have an elite quarterback. So you can see some of those traits. I have a 1,000-yard rusher from last year, a 1,000-yard receiver, a quarterback who can be a first-round pick. You have all the things. It ain't like you just have one receiver. You have 3 to 4 that can really be productive. So you can definitely see the similarities. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go score 60, 70 like they were doing in 2011.
Right.
Like that, but I definitely think they can put a lot of pressure on a lot of defenses. Now, I know these defenses are a lot more athletic now. You got some safeties back then that are now sort of like linebackers now. They can run sideline to sideline. But, I definitely think this offense is going to be fun to watch.
Well, and like I said, I think that if you combine a little bit of 2011 and a little bit of 2017, that's what you're going to get. For example, in 2011, we averaged 48.7 points a game. I don't think that's going to happen. But in 2017, we were closer to that 45 a game. I think that is a possibility to some degree for Oklahoma State this upcoming season. Yards per game, 2011, 545. 2017, 571. I think you might be able to split the difference. Passing yards a game, 387 in 2011, 389 in 2017. Rushing yards, 158.7 in 2011 and 182.2 in 2017. So I think that you can take a little bit of both of those, piece them together, and potentially get a very competent Oklahoma State offense this upcoming season. And I'll tell you one of the beauties of it, that 2011 team, one of the biggest reasons why Dana Holgorsen and Todd Monken wanted Oklahoma State to get the ball out very, very quick was because we had some deficiencies on the offensive line. I do think the offensive line is going to be upgraded this upcoming season, right? You've got some big body beasts that you didn't necessarily have in 2011. So we had to do a lot of zone blocking stuff then to complement the offensive firepower with what we had at the offensive line at the time, right?
Yeah.
With some of the question marks about the offensive line. That's why I say I think we've got enough talent, both at wide receiver and at quarterback, and within this offensive system to give Drew Mestemaker those 3 to 4 second windows. Now, when you don't have the entire O-line figured out, asking him for 5 seconds, maybe a little bit more than we can bite off in the beginning. So I do think also the backfield. Right, 2011, I think Joe Randall ran for 1,300 yards. 2017, we also had Justice Hill rush for 1,400 yards. That's a major component. And we saw this as Oklahoma State fans the last couple of seasons, but in reverse, every team we played was loading up the box, putting 8 dudes in there because they knew we weren't going to be able to throw the ball. So it was all about stopping Ollie Gordon. That's all everybody was focused on. And it even carried into this previous season as well, right? Regardless of who the running back is, if you load the box against Oklahoma State and you make them throw to beat you, you're probably going to win. You can't do that this year. There's nobody is going to be putting 8 dudes in the box when you've got people like Caleb Hawkins and Trey Page and Iowa Day and Katie Batman Jones back there. So what are your thoughts on just the capability for all positions to open up the offense to get close to what we had in those 2 seasons?
Yeah, and I think an underrated aspect of it is if you go that fast, if you want to play that fast, that high scoring type of offense, I think it's sort of how does that affect the defense? The depth of defense. Being a defensive lineman, I've been on some of those teams. You sit down, you score offense 2-3 plays, touchdown. So I really feel it's really the depth of defensive line, the interior defensive line, how tired does that make them playing that type of ball? I know you can probably look at the Nick Saban teams, they were smash mouth football. You get to now all of a sudden you got all these fancy receivers, you want to throw it around the yard. And I think that's sort of when Alabama started to dip a little bit because they sort of went away from what they were good at because defense is out there a lot when you're playing that style of ball. So I'll ask you, do you think the defense will be ready for that type of style? And you could probably talk about how the defense was in 2011 and then 2017.
Well, I think 2011 could have a lot of commonality with this 2026 bunch because in 2011, we gave up quite a few yards, right? We didn't necessarily do great in between the 20s, but we were a very good red zone team. We were top 15 in the country in turnovers. We were top 10 in the country in turnover margin. So we were very opportunistic. We were a pesky defense in 2011. Sure, you may put up 500 yards, but we would make you pay along the way. And again, I think that is kind of the Skylar Cassidy model that he's trying to somewhat replicate. And the biggest question when it comes down to that is going to be rotation. And that may be the biggest equation that come out of Saturday as it pertains to the defensive side of the ball is rotation. We've got a bunch of rotation. Obviously, part of that is trying to, identify the top group before they get into week one. But I think part of that could be strategic as it pertains to like the defensive line, linebackers. I do think that there is a rotational component to this that they do plan on somewhat implementing during the season. So we'll get to that here in segment 2. But before we do that, real quick, just to put a bow on it, yeah, I think that you have a lot of similarities. If you go look at the rosters in 2011 and you go look at the roster right now at Oklahoma State with what they were capable of doing in the skill positions to now, it's almost like a mirror image. The difference being maybe we didn't have as heralded of a Joe Randall's type because Caleb Hawkins is coming from North Texas. Maybe we didn't have a Justin Blackman type because Justin Bowick is coming from Illinois. But mark my words, when you have an NFL level quarterback that can put the ball in crazy places that most other teams in the country cannot, you're going to give yourself an opportunity to do just that. And when you have enough rotation defensively, then perhaps you can field a football team that can do enough of both. All right. So we got an ad here and we'll slide into segment 2 and talk about some of the rotation real quickly. It is time to get energized, and there's nobody better in the business than 5 Hour Energy to help you do just that. If you've got a sweet tooth, like I definitely do, you know how tough it can be to find the perfect treat without all the unnecessary sugar. This is where Cotton Candy's 5 Hour Energy is a necessity, and they're going to bring that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. This is the classic cotton candy taste that you remember in your childhood, but with a tasty caffeine boost and zero sugar to boot. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. I've always loved cotton candy, right? That was one of the prime parts of going to the fairgrounds was you get to have some cotton candy before you got up on the rides. It's that nostalgic feeling that's going to help you kind of throw back to your youth. You're going to love how convenient it is too. It's small, it's portable. You can just shoot it and grab it whenever as you're on the go. It's a little pick-me-up to your day. It's going to become a go-to for this football season as you're going to need to stay energized just to watch this Oklahoma State offense perform because it's going to be exhausting. So fix your exhaustion ahead of time. Order some 5 Hour Energy. Bring the sweetness with Cotton Candy's 5 Hour Energy shots to your home and to your taste buds. It's available online right now. Make sure that you head on over to 5hourenergy.com, or you can also get them on Amazon. Go to 5hourenergy.com. The bee's knees and the energy pick-me-up is here for you this football season. All right, brother man, we're going to roll right into segment 2 here. And yes, let's expound a little bit more on the rotation. I do want to get, very deep into the linebacker conversation because that was a very hot topic, I think, over the weekend. But before we do that, one of the biggest difficulties positionally to get a barometer on how we're going to look was the defensive line because it was rotation like crazy. You play defensive line at UAB. Whenever you don't have a reliable rotation, what is that like for the starting group? Like, you feel like you're letting your team down if you get injured because there's going to be a drop-off or I don't know, do you feel like you can play a little bit more aggressively and throw caution to the wind when you know you got a dude right behind you? What are your thoughts on that? Because in the NIL era, as people are getting ready for the NFL draft, you would assume to some degree, if I'm an All-American defensive end, I want all the snaps, every one of them. I don't want to have to split. But if the guy behind you is almost equally as good and it allows you to stay fresh, is there a hidden recipe for success there, brother?
Yeah, most definitely. You talk to some defensive linemen off the camera and they say sometimes you feel like on a bad defense, sometimes when I know I have to play the whole game, some people say they sort of have to save themselves. Like they don't want to go hard every play, but it's sort of hindering the defense in some type because they're saving themselves because they're not going 100%.
Yeah.
And sometimes because they don't have depth, like what are they supposed to do? Go all out. Then in the fourth quarter, they're dead. So I feel like depth is a major component of it. You have to have 4 to 5 interior defensive linemen that you can roll in each and every game.
Yeah.
You want to have about 6 to 7 that you can rely on just going in just in case. Because, I mean, you're a rolled ankle away from another one going in. I mean, you got to have interior defensive linemen. I talked to a GM off the camera. You got to have defensive linemen, corners, and receivers. Like, those are like the most important positions, receiver and corners, because of special teams. Corners, you can have so many of them on the field.
Oh, yeah.
Defensive line, it's the depth. Wide receivers, special teams. Like, you got to have a receiver. You have to have defensive linemen. You obviously have to have a quarterback. So, and you have to have a game-changing pass rusher on the edge. So, if a pass rusher can play, let's say, 60 snaps on defense, if you can play him 30 snaps and let him be fresh, 50% on the sidelines, like if it's a rundown, I know I got my good pass rusher on the sidelines for 3rd and 1. I mean, just keep them guys fresh. Like, that's what the big schools like Georgia and Ohio State do. They have so many packages for like certain scenarios.
Well, I think part of that has to be strategically based on the offense, because as you had mentioned, when you have a high-flying offense that can score in 15 seconds, the downside to that is they can go 3 and out in 15 seconds sometimes too, which does put a ton of pressure on your defense. And if you don't have a lot of depth, then your defense is going to be sucking wind in the 4th quarter, no matter who you're playing. And in the Big 12, where it's a lot of one-score ball games, it's a lot of overtime style of situations, that could be a kiss of death for any team coming into the season. But as it pertains to Oklahoma State, I'll tell you, when was it Coach Cassidy or Coach Morris last week said that we have like 11, 12 defensive linemen that we plan on rotating? It was either Cassidy or Morris, but I think it was Cassidy. Anyways, when our coach said that we plan on rotating like 11, 12 dudes, I was like, that's got to be coach speak, right? That's got to be just to keep everybody in the room motivated. But man, Saturday, that's essentially what they were doing. Yeah. It was rotate, right? And it's hard not to view a track speed level of offense without having depth. And I think if we go back to 2011, maybe that was one of the reasons why we gave up yards. Maybe, as you mentioned, the players knew they had to play all full quarters, every single snap. So, maybe around the 50-yard line, they don't put up the same effort that they would on the 10-yard line. I think that there is a component to that could be logical. And so obviously I think the idea here is to get, this rotation going like crazy. The other rotation that went kind of crazy over the weekend was that linebacker room. And the reason I bring this up, right? I think coming into the season, Texas Tech not only has the best linebacker room in the conference, they might have the best linebacker room in America. They've got 3 dudes that are all over the top 10 PFF in a large number of categories, right? So Oklahoma State's not there at all. But let's take this into perspective. We got Isaiah Chisholm coming in from UCLA, which the Bruins, if you go look at their message boards, they were losing their ever-loving mind about losing Isaiah Chisholm, right? They thought from an NIL perspective that was going to be one of the top, desired positions to keep. For him to come over with 84 tackles last year, 173 in his last couple years at UCLA, for him to come over and get passed up to some degree by Tate Romney is, I don't know, I don't want to say a bad thing. That's going to be great for Oklahoma State. That is going to be a big deal for us moving forward. But I think it shows to the level of depth that this linebacker room does have, because you have a guy coming over from UCLA that everybody penciled in as an automatic day one easy street starter. For him to get passed up by somebody who hasn't really played in a couple years due to injury. I know Tate Romney got some run as a freshman at BYU, and then he got a little bit of play at Arizona State before his injuries popped up. So it's not completely unfamiliar to him per se, but it's surprising. And then you hear, okay, so if you got him getting passed up and you got Ethan Wisłowski over here that's like Malcolm Rodriguez level number, 115, 113 some odd tackles last year alone. And now you got Isaiah Chisholm. Okay, that's a 3 deep at one position group that not very many people are going to have. And then you hear that it gets better. You got Trip White from Ole Miss, who is not only going to be a reliable veteran now at Oklahoma State, but you've also got Gunnar Wilson that has been biding his time at Oklahoma State for a little bit. You got Jack Puckett that provided some good moments on Saturday. Torian Davis, I know maybe he was a little absent over the weekend, but throughout the course of the spring, like a lot of people were talking about the potential of Torian Davis being a big-time guy for Oklahoma State. When you think of all these linebackers that could potentially, be the deepest in the conference, maybe not the best. I'm not trying to encroach on Tech territory, but maybe the deepest. What are your thoughts on that? Because again, if you ask some people there, they didn't really notice when the second and third string linebackers were in because the production was about the same. And the only other position I heard that was wide receiver. Wide receiver, there wasn't a lot of drop off. From the linebacker room, people were like, there wasn't a lot of drop off, man. First team, second team, third, even the third team dudes were making some crazy plays.
Yeah, and being a defensive lineman, I think a lot of people forget, like, the linebackers are really, like, the key of the defense. Like, it's been so many times I forget, or the guy by me will forget, the linebackers are getting you lined up. The linebackers are the guys that make that defense go. And, Coach Moore talked about Tate is an older guy. Tate is an experienced guy. So him and Ethan and even Chisholm, like, it could be a scenario where them three could be in together. I know he wants to have Bodner at that nickel position, but you definitely could play three linebackers, go 4-3 in a certain way. So I think that would be interesting to see. But, the depth part of the linebacker position, I mean, you can never have enough depth in power forward. Like,
yeah.
Injuries happen. Something could happen where a guy isn't playing good. The more depth, the better.
Of course. Now, is there a little bit of a madness component to rotating a little bit too much, right? Well, where's that fine line at?
Yeah, I heard you say about rotating the 12 defensive linemen. Like 12, that sounds a little, like, insane. Like, I feel like that's coach speak.
I thought that number was crazy.
Yeah, like 12, because you got to realize if I'm rotating 12 guys, how long is my starters on the sideline while I'm rotating those 12 guys? Or do I not feel confident in my starting guys or I have to have them on the sideline for that long? If that makes sense. Because if I have two legit starters and I feel like I have to, rotate 12 guys, maybe I don't feel too confident in that 1 through 4 defensive lineman range if I'm playing, 12 guys. But I think that's probably, just coach speak.
Well, and I tell you this, another thing, I really do like the idea of having somebody like a Carl Young kind of play that stand-up outside linebacker / defensive end hybrid. I think Colin Oliver made that position somewhat famous for Oklahoma State country. So to see somebody like Carl Young that came in, right, 4-star recruit from the state of Oklahoma, he came in the building out of high school at 6'4", 235. Like, that's a rare individual that Oklahoma State got their hands on early. And I'm sure he's been able to pack on some pounds. I'm excited to see now that he can utilize his athleticism. It should look comparable to some degree to what Colin Oliver was able to do. All right, buddy, man. We've got to sneak in another ad here before we get to segment 3. So let's go ahead and knock that out. The best in the business is here. And if y'all are anything like me, our daily dingers with Christian Encarnacion Strand stood up and delivered for us over the weekend. And if you're a baseball fan like me, it's probably time for you to get in on this daily dingers action that FanDuel is going to provide for you. It's a chance for you to give a free shot with a daily dinger. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick on who you think is going to hit a bomb in their ball game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost that you can use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make your free pick every day throughout the Major League season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with everyday games, whether you're feeling your favorite player or you're following an epic matchup. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction. Why would I get off of choosing Christian Encarnacion Strand? I mean, the dude just delivered with a 453 some odd foot homer the other day. And the fact that he gets to do it with Jackson Holiday in the orange and black, it's just too cool to not capitalize on. So jump in the Christian Encarnacion daily dinger with me. Capitalize today. If you're ready to play your game, play today with FanDuel. Join the action. Go to FanDuel.com. Play daily dingers. Make your free pick on who's going to hit a bomb. Play ball and swing for the fences all day, every day on FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, last but not least, we talk about Texas Tech having the best linebacker core coming into the season. Arizona State has the best wide receiver core coming into the season. And I get when they go get a Marion Miller to go along some of the returning guys that they have, it is very, very impressive. I, too, think on paper, ASU does have the best wide receiver core coming into the season. But I ain't talking about now. I'm talking about when the season's over.
Yeah.
Do you think Arizona State will remain the top wide receiver group in the conference when the season is over, sir?
Yeah, and to get Texas Tech some credit too. They just need somebody to get those receivers over there the ball. They have a very deep room at Texas Tech.
Okay.
So 5 stars that might not even be starters over there. But yes, Oklahoma State has 4 good receivers that I feel like has NFL upside. You know, Chris Barnes, you could see him a big year. He could be an NFL receiver. I think Wyatt Young is the most talented of the group, but on physical size, Bowick is obviously the one that you look at getting off the bus. You're like, oh, okay. And then Miles Coleman, obviously being that 4th, maybe that 3rd guy, he has that wiggle, he has that speed. So you have 4 guys that can really go. So I feel like it's a very good deep receiver room. I feel like the best maybe out of the ones we mentioned is probably the guy at Arizona State, Amarion Miller. You know, him being at a bad Colorado team still shining. We all know like he is a dude on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you could even talk about, you know, outside of just those primary 4, right? Terrence Lewis was the name that was brought up a decent amount over the weekend. North Texas transfer. You have Rodney Harris II coming over from Ohio that had 730 some odd, 740-ish yards this previous season. And then I think whenever you're just, I don't know, collectively thinking of this wide receiver room, yes, Justin Boak, 6'5", 230. Apparently he runs a 4.3 40. I've been saying 4.4 on my show pretty repeatedly. Evidently, he runs a 4.3 at 6'4", 230. That's absolutely insane. Talk about a Justin Blackman, Des Bryant kind of dude. You already mentioned Miles Coleman. He does seem to be that definite wide receiver number 4. He would be a wide receiver number 2, 3 if we didn't have Chris Barnes, if we didn't have Wyatt Young. Wyatt Young is a projected NFL level dude, but Justin Bowick, if he does have a big season, NFL scouts are going to be salivating over the prospects of what he could do. And he's got a couple years left too, right? So it's not like Justin Bowick's going to be a one and done kind of dude. And then at the end of the day, man, I think you got to talk about some of the freshmen. Like Jabari Thornton is a freshman name that gets mentioned every now and again. Last year, there was a lot of talk about Motrell Lopez getting some starting time before he broke a bone in his finger. You have Cam Powell returning from this previous season as well. Both of those guys got some play on the special teams. At the end of the day, man, I think people are going to be sleeping. And then you have Israel Polk, who had almost 600 yards at Akron. That's another 6'1", 6'2" dude. So we've got size. We've got Tyreek Hill almost. No one has Tyreek speed, but Chris Barnes probably pretty daggone close. Miles Coleman's probably all that not far behind him. Then you've got guys like Rodney Harris that can go get up, and you got Terrence Lewis that is making a little bit of a name for himself coming over from North Texas. I don't know, man. In order for Oklahoma State to have the season they need to have, this wide receiver room does need to be that good. Like you look at 2011, right? Everyone talks about Justin Blackman, but it wasn't just him. You look at 2017, we had Chris Lacey played multiple years in the NFL. Marcel Aitman played multiple years in the NFL. James Washington had a little bit of a run there in the NFL. Dylan Stoner got some play with the Vegas Raiders. I don't necessarily know that we have that per se, but I think we get fairly close. I think we get at least close to being the top wide receiver group by the end of the year. You mentioned Texas Tech. I think Arizona State, Texas Tech probably do have the cream of the crop right now, but it'll be interesting to take a peek back on this when the season's over, because I think Oklahoma State's wide receiver room could do some crazy things, man. We could be talking about multiple NFL guys on this wide receiver roster, just like the 2017 wide receiver roster.
Yeah. You said Justin Bowick ran a 4.3. I wanted to ask, like, what was Illinois over there doing with a 4.3 speed receiver that big? Like, were they just not getting on the ball? I know Coach Morris talked about he was getting some red zone targets, but like what were they doing over there with him? It feels like.
Well, if you go back and look, right, I think I don't know this, but I would assume that it was just his routes weren't as crisp as you need somebody that size to be. Like, you can't give dead giveaways when you're going into your breakdown because it gives a beat on the route. And I think maybe there was some of that, but it was easy in the red zone. They're like, all right. And at the time, he was probably still 215-ish, 6'4", 215, 40-inch vertical. Let's just throw it up to that dude. So I think that is some of it. You know, we talk about Oklahoma State's defense in 2011 not being great between the 20s. I think maybe his route concepts between the 20s were a little problematic for them, which is why he was primarily a red zone target because, yeah, you're right. If he's not constantly playing, you're basically putting him in to be an extra tight end. And that's essentially what Illinois did. They turned him into an extra tight end. But I think that he even realized that, okay, I'm clearly good enough to do this at this level because he led them in receptions, touchdown receptions. So even though he didn't play a lot between the 20s, when they needed him, he was the primary target.
Mm-hmm.
So now that he's been able to work a little bit more on pliability, dexterity, side-to-side lateral quickness while he's been at Oklahoma State, and he's gone from a 4.4 to apparently a 4.3, I would imagine that the routes are much more crisp than they were at Illinois, and I think we're about to see that on display.
Yeah, if he runs a 4.3, he's going to the league with a good couple of years. If he's that big, running a 4.3 with that size and that speed, if he can put it all together, he's an NFL type receiver.
Well, I think a lot of us, I can't speak for a lot of us, I can speak for me. Whenever you originally found out that we got this 6'4" wide receiver from Illinois, and then you do a little bit of research and doesn't have a ton of yards. He only had like 250 yards, something to that effect. But then you go see, almost double-digit touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, so he's probably going to beef up at Oklahoma State and become a tight end. I think some people could have naturally foreseen that to be an option. And then you hear, no, he's definitely a wide receiver. And then you hear, oh, no, he's not only a wide receiver, but he's almost as fast as somebody like a Chris Barnes. And you're like, well, hold the phone now. You're telling me that we got the dude that's the size of a tight end that can almost run with one of the fastest wide receivers in the conference? Okay, cool. Sign me up. Again, that sounds like the prototypical outside receiver that Oklahoma State's been able to get since 2006 when we were able to land Des Bryant. Since then, almost every year, there's been one of those guys. Even, I know this is probably going to hurt some hearts. Did you see Dijon Stribling go crazy the other day?
From Ole Miss, yeah.
Yeah, he was a Cowboy for 2 years before Ole Miss. And that's like when, people talk about this wide receiver conversation, we would still be in it if Dijon Stribling would have never left Oklahoma State. But I understand him leaving because we didn't have a dude that could get him the ball enough to showcase his capabilities. And I think even to some degree, Ole Miss didn't give him enough opportunities to showcase his capabilities, or he would have been a higher draft pick. But yeah, it goes to show that you have to have the right pieces in the right places. But again, this ties back into segment one. Why I think this offense could look something like a merger of 2011 and 2017. I think we've got the horses in the stable to put up those kind of numbers at wide receiver. I think we've got a guy in the backfield that can put up 12, 13, 1,400 yards, or at least put up enough to make the defense respect what we do offensively. And then you've got a quarterback that is the great equalizer. You've got a quarterback that can put the ball in places that he hasn't been able to previously. Lastly, I'll say, I think even Eric Morse mentioned this, not a dig at North Texas wide receivers by any stretch, but he made the joke that it was, I don't know, something to do with Chris Barnes and Moss Coleman. We're going to have to make a lot of big plays because it's going to be easy for Mestemaker to throw to number 0 out there because he can throw it anywhere to number 0 and he's going to make a catch. He mentioned at North Texas, Drew Mestemaker had to kind of be a fine-tooth comb. He had to operate with surgical precision. He didn't necessarily have a dude that could just go up and catch it from anywhere. And again, you've got a 6'4" wide receiver with like a 6'8" wingspan and a 40-inch vertical. That's a quarterback's best friend.
Yeah.
And then you've got Oscar Hammond out here killing it at tight end.
Hearing good things about him. Yeah.
I think we're going to be a problem, man. I think we're going to be a big, big problem for Big 12 teams. this season.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, give us closing remarks, and we'll let the fine folks know how they can find you, and we'll skedaddle on off of here. What is your closing statement, sir, before you tell the people how they can track you down?
Most definitely. It'll be here before we know it. I'm ready. I'm ready to see Oklahoma State go to Tulsa and play. You guys can check me out at Night Vision Media. I'm going to have a lot of things rolling on there soon, busy with grad school, but I'm definitely going to be rolling on a lot of episodes in the next couple of weeks.
Enjoy that education in Stillwater, America. Yeah, we'll definitely check back in. I know you've got some practices that you're going to be able to hit here coming up. So until then, Connor, I greatly appreciate your brother, man.
Yes, sir.
And all you fine folks out here, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it. Dislike if you didn't. That's okay, too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast and people out there, you're everything that makes this work. Without you, I'd be a mess, just yelling into the void. So I appreciate what you do. Go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.